You have almost certainly heard of Balto, the heroic sled dog, the one with the bronze statue in New York's Central Park, the one they made the movie about. For nearly 100 years, Balto has been the four-legged hero of one of the greatest rescues in history. There's just one small problem with that. Balto is not really the hero of this story. The dog who did the hardest, longest, most terrifying part of the journey, through a blizzard that should have killed him, has been almost completely forgotten. His name was Togo. And by the end of this, I promise you we'll never forget him. So settle in, because this one is genuinely one of the most incredible animal stories ever told. Let's set the scene. It is winter, 1925, in Nome, Alaska, and you cannot imagine a more isolated place. Nome sits right up near the Arctic Circle, on the edge of the frozen Bering Sea. In summer, ships can reach it, but in winter, the sea freezes solid, the port shuts down, and the town is essentially cut off from the rest of the world. No roads out. The nearest railway ends hundreds of miles away. It is a tiny community of a couple of thousand people, hunkered down in the dark and the cold, completely alone. And then, disaster. Children in Nome start falling sick. The local doctor recognizes it immediately, and it is his worst nightmare: diphtheria. A brutal, contagious disease that attacks the throat, and back then, without treatment, it killed children with horrifying speed. Nome had almost no antitoxin serum left, and what little it had was expired. The doctor knew that without fresh serum, an epidemic could tear through the town and kill hundreds of kids. It was a death sentence hanging over the entire community. There was serum. The problem was where it was. The nearest batch was almost 1,000 kilometers away, in Anchorage. And getting it to Nome was the impossible part. It was the depths of the Alaskan winter. The two aeroplanes available were old, open-cockpit models that had been dismantled for the season, and flying them in these temperatures, in the dark, would almost certainly be fatal. The sea was frozen. There was only one way that serum was going to reach those children, the way Alaska had always moved through winter: dogs. So they came up with a plan that sounds completely insane, and was completely necessary. The serum would travel by train as far as the tracks went, to a town called Nenana. And from there, it would be carried the rest of the way, over 600 miles of frozen wilderness, by a relay of dog sled teams, musher to musher, team to team, handing off the precious package like a baton in the most dangerous race imaginable. They called it the Great Race of Mercy. Around 20 mushers and roughly 150 dogs would risk their lives in temperatures that could hit -50 in the dark, through blizzards, to save a town full of children. Now, most of these mushers would run a relatively short leg, 30 miles here, 40 miles there, before handing off to the next team. But there was one stretch that was longer and more dangerous than all the others. And for that stretch, they needed the best. And the best musher in Alaska was a Norwegian named Leonhard Seppala. And Seppala's lead dog, the animal he trusted with his life, was a small 12-year-old Siberian husky named Togo. And here's the thing you need to understand about Togo. He should never have been a sled dog at all. As a puppy, he was small, sickly, and a complete menace. He was constantly ill. He had a fiery, stubborn temper, and Seppala actually considered him useless. In fact, Seppala gave him away to another home as a pet. But Togo was having none of it. He broke free, threw himself through a glass window, and ran all the way back to Seppala's kennel. This dog had decided who he belonged to, and that was that. And then Togo did something that changed everything. He kept escaping his pen at night to run alongside the working sled teams, keeping pace mile after mile, nipping at the other dogs, basically insisting he be allowed to join. Eventually, an exasperated Seppala harnessed him just to keep him under control, and on his very first day in a harness, Togo ran 75 miles. 75. On day one. Seppala later said he had never seen anything like it. That so-called useless troublemaker turned out to be a natural-born leader, one of the greatest sled dogs who ever lived. By 1925, Togo was 12 years old, which is genuinely ancient for a lead dog, but there was no one Seppala trusted more. So the relay begins. The serum leaves Nenana, and team after team pushes west through the brutal cold, each musher fighting exhaustion and frostbite to hand the package on. Meanwhile, Seppala and Togo set out east from Nome to meet the serum halfway and carry it back over their long, dangerous stretch. And this is where Togo earns his place in history. because to save time, Sapala made a decision that could get them all killed. Instead of following the safe route around the edge of a huge inlet called Norton Sound, he chose to go straight across it, across the frozen sea ice. Now, Norton Sound is terrifying. The sea ice there can crack and break apart without warning, and if it does, you and your dogs go straight into the freezing water and you do not come out. Crossing it was a gamble with everyone's lives, but it would save a full day, and children were dying. So out onto the ice they went, into a howling blizzard, in the dark, in temperatures around -30, with the wind screaming so hard that Sapala often could not see his own dogs. And in those conditions, it was not Sapala guiding the team. It was Togo, a 12-year-old dog, half blind in one eye, leading them by instinct and scent and sheer nerve across cracking sea ice he could barely see, in a storm that could have swallowed them whole. He picked the safe paths. He kept them off the thin ice. And when they finally reached the far shore, exhausted and alive, the ice they had just crossed broke apart behind them and drifted out to sea. They had made it across with almost nothing to spare. By the time Sapala and Togo had done their part, they had traveled an astonishing distance. Depending on how you count it, Togo's team covered around 260 miles on that journey. Compare that to the average leg run by the other teams, which was about 30 miles each. Togo did not just run the longest and most dangerous stretch. He ran a distance almost 10 times what most of the other dogs ran, through the worst of the weather, across the most lethal terrain at 12 years old. There is simply no argument. Togo carried the serum through the deadliest part of the entire route. Sapala handed the serum off to the next team, and it continued on toward Nome, changing hands a few more times. And the very last leg, the final 53 miles into Nome itself, was run by a team led by a dog named Balto, driven by a musher called Gunner Kaysen. They pushed through a fresh blizzard, and in the early hours of the 2nd of February 1925, Balto's team pulled into Nome and delivered the serum. The children were saved. The town was saved. It was genuinely a miracle of courage and teamwork. And here is where the story takes its bittersweet turn. Because Balto crossed the finish line. Balto's team delivered the serum into Nome, and the press went wild. Balto became an overnight sensation. Newspapers around the world ran his name. Within the year, a bronze statue of Balto was put up in Central Park in New York, where it still stands today. Decades later, he got a hit animated movie. Balto became, and remains, the most famous sled dog in history. And Togo? Togo, who ran nearly 10 times the distance. Togo, who crossed the breaking sea ice in the dark. Togo, who led through the deadliest storm of the whole run at 12 years old. Togo got almost nothing. The glory went to the dog who ran the final, shorter leg, because that was the leg that happened to arrive in town, in front of the cameras. Sapala was reportedly heartbroken and bitter about it for the rest of his life. He always insisted that Togo was the real hero, and that the credit had gone to the wrong dog. Now, to be completely fair, this is not really Balto's fault, and it is not to say Balto did nothing. Balto and Kaysen ran a genuinely dangerous final leg through a blizzard, and they earned their place in the story too. Every single musher and every single dog in that relay was a hero. That is the honest truth. But if we are talking about who did the hardest, most dangerous, most extraordinary work of that entire journey, it was not the dog with the statue. It was the small, stubborn, half-blind, 12-year-old husky that most people have never even heard of. Togo lived out his final years in retirement. His body was worn down by all those thousands of miles. He developed arthritis, and he slowly went blind. And in 1929, at the age of 16, an old and tired Togo was gently put to sleep, with Sapala beside him. Sapala grieved him deeply, and spent years trying to make sure people knew what his dog had truly done. And slowly, finally, the world has started to catch up. In recent years, Togo has begun to get the recognition he always deserved. He has been named one of the most heroic animals in history. His preserved body is on display in a museum in Alaska, so people can still come and stand in front of the little dog who saved a town. And in 2019, he finally got his own film, telling his side of the story at last. So here is why this one sticks with me. It is a story about courage and loyalty and a bond between a man and a dog that was strong enough to cross breaking sea ice in a blizzard. but it is also a quiet lesson about fame. Sometimes the one who gets the statue is not the one who did the most. Sometimes the real hero is the one at the front of the pack, in the dark, in the storm, doing the impossible while nobody is watching. Balto got the monument, but Togo did the miracle. So the next time someone mentions Balto, you will know the rest of the story. You will know about the little troublemaker who threw himself through a window to be with the person he loved, and then, years later, ran the run of his life to help save a town full of children he would never meet. His name was Togo, and now you will not forget him. If you enjoyed this one, stick around because there are so many more incredible animal stories where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.